All right. Well, to stay on track, we'll go ahead and get started. As people come in, they should be muted and camera off anyway. Um, First, I want to introduce myself and my colleagues. I'm Crystal McKelvey. I'm in the Department of Conservation and Recreation, Division of Planning and Recreation Resources. I also want to recognize Kelly Seaton, who's online. She's our grants coordinator, overseeing multiple grant programs, including Recreational Trails Program and American Battlefield Protection Program. And Tariq Mansouri is our grant assistant that is also with us in the Planning and Recreation Division. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera. This is being recorded, but I think all of you are muted at this time, but should have the capability to type questions in. So welcome to the Land and Water Conservation Fund educational webinar. The Land and Water Conservation Fund LWCF applications that we're going to discuss are due to our office via email April 18th. As I said, this will be recorded, and after this, it will be both the recording and a PDF will be posted onto the LWCF website. Questions are encouraged. Again, you should be able to type them in the chat box, and Kelly will be monitoring that as we go. And as they add up, we'll stop and answer those. There will also be a Q&A at the end of this session, and that way you can unmute and be able to ask out loud. As a note, this workshop does not contain all of the information. This is an overview, and also the applicant responsibilities associated with the program. Must adhere to all state and federal requirements. There's multiple CFRs involved. And for any deep questions, you can go to the National Park Service LWCF manual, which is version 73 currently, and is available on our website. So today we're going to touch on the subject of the ORLP program application, and then we're going to do an overview of LWCF and go over the different items required for the application process. First, I'll discuss briefly the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program, or ORLP. This is a national competitive grant administered directly by the National Park Service. Right, this opportunity is for development projects specifically in disadvantaged urban community. There are extra points for a focus on natural area preservation as well. DCR will take these applications and submit the proposals to the National Park Service directly, and then we must wait for response from them at the National Park Service upon their merit review. This is a pre-application process this year. Once it's reviewed and initially selected by the National Park Service, we will then direct the sponsor to submit a full application for NPS authorization. We did announce these at the same time on our press release and our website, but there's an earlier application date of April 4th, 2024 for the Outdoor Recreation Legacy Program applications. To give you a little more information, the park area must be within a census tract that is determined to be disadvantaged on the 2020 census of the Climate and Environmental Justice Screening Tool. I advise you to read the entire National Park Service Notice of Funding Opportunity, which again is posted linked on our website, to see what the merit criteria is and also the specifics of the program. Consider carefully if you want ORLP or LWCF stateside formula. You cannot apply to both for the same project. Based on the 2020 census and that it must have a population of over 300,000, there are 18 qualifying cities and towns in Virginia. If you are not one of these listed cities or towns, you are not eligible for ORLP, but you're certainly eligible for the Land and Water Conservation Fund. For a very useful tool if you are pursuing an ORLP grant is the Trust for Public Lands Toolkit. And they have a link here. This is a screenshot from their website where they really get into the nitty-gritty of the different nuances of the program and also how to apply and use the application items. The ORLP uses the Climate and Economic Justice Screening Tool to identify the exact census tracts that are eligible. The park must be within that census tract and of a tract that is determined to be underserved or disadvantaged. Here's just an example in the city of Portsmouth. I've zoomed into one track. You can go to this platform, zoom into your locality, click the tracks that you're pursuing for the park, And if it says identified as disadvantaged, yes, then it's likely that your park and tract would be eligible. So there is more to be learned about ORLAP, but I just wanted to provide an overview of that. The main purpose of this webinar today is about the Land and Water Conservation Fund stateside and local formula. This program provides funds to acquire recreation lands as well as to develop and renovate outdoor recreation amenities. All the parks that receive this funding are then protected in perpetuity for the sole purpose of public outdoor recreation. It's pretty exciting because then you forever have a resource for your community and future generations to come. There are multiple entities that are eligible to apply. This includes localities such as cities, towns, and counties, some qualified local government agencies, planning district commissions, recreation authorities as deemed by General Assembly, also state agencies, and tribal entities. The project types include acquisition, rehabilitation, or a combination of acquisition and construction, or a combination of acquisition and rehabilitation. Acquisition projects are usually pretty popular for applying to the Land and Water Conservation Fund, and this requires undeveloped land that will then be developed for recreation or is slated to be developed and the locality wants to protect it, or recreation land that is not currently available to the general public. Acquisition projects must be appraised with the federal or Yellow Book certified standards. This is very important. Also, that appraisal must have an independent review. Eligible costs for acquisition projects is limited to the appraised land value. And basically, we are only reimbursing 50% of the cost of the property itself. Ineligible costs include the cost of the appraisal and the review. Attorney fees and title searches are not eligible for reimbursement. Appraisers are required to determine the fair market value for projects selected to move forward. As I said, all appraisals must also have an independent review at the Yellow Book standard. The cost for that review is the responsibility of the applicant, and this is when it's only acquisition projects. We don't have to have an appraisal for a project that you're doing development on. On to development projects. Basically, if it's outdoor public recreation, it is eligible, but this includes playgrounds, ball fields, splash pads, restrooms, camping, and more. And I have an asterisk here for trails because it has to protect an entire park. And so please do consider carefully if you have a phase of a trail or an area that can be directly delineated as a park itself, then it's eligible. But there are certain ways that if you have a long trail and you're only doing part of it, we encourage you to talk with us before you get too deep so that we know how it's going to be delineated with the LWCF boundary. There are some resources or amenities that are ineligible for development projects. Mostly that includes indoor facilities of most types, including gymnasiums, community or senior centers, as well as arenas, or areas that will be for semi-professional teams primarily. Also, LWCF state and local formula is not for the purpose of historic preservation. Renovation and rehabilitation projects are also eligible of existing outdoor recreation facilities, especially if it's going to the same or different types of facility for public enjoyment and use. Great examples of this are to bring park amenities up to standard for ADA compliance and/or upgrade to provide a resilient or floodplain avoidance site. Renovation and rehab project examples include replacing lighting at a ball field or at your park for safety, resurfacing a trail from gravel to asphalt, converting swimming pools to splash pads, or even changing tennis courts to skate parks. This is usually determined within your comprehensive plan or in discussion with your community how the parkland can best be used. Apply for all of your outdoor recreation needs and what you can accomplish within the funds and the timelines. Usually these are 3-year project periods, so do consider carefully what can be done, accomplished within that time period. and also what funding you have available up front. This year, our minimum award is for $250,000, which equates to a $500,000 total project, because this is a 1-to-1 or 50% match reimbursement program. It requires a dollar-for-dollar match, and you must be able to fund the project 100% while seeking those reimbursements. The maximum award this year is up to $12 million. We annually get an apportionment of approximately $6.5 million in Virginia, so that's why we have that available amount. And we will see what we get for applications. It could be any range depending on the project types and the scoring. As I said, this is a reimbursement program. No money is transferred to the applicant ahead of time. When you do request a reimbursement, you must provide the pay, expense, and invoice to verify the amount spent, submit the documents, and then receive the reimbursement of 50% of the eligible costs. There are certain documents that we provide to help you with that process. All documentation is up for review by DCR Finance as well as the National Park Service staff prior to releasing the funds. Let's discuss some ways to match the grant, and you must be able to present an overview of this within the budget at time of application. You cannot start your project, get authorized, and then add different ways of matching or different budget items, really. The applicant's cash and cash donations are the most used categories. That way it's straight, you pay 100% of each phase and then you get 100% back. There are ways to use in-kind labor, equipment rental, and materials as your match on your expenses. And when we're talking about materials, do be mindful that the Build America, Buy America requirements do have to be followed for these projects since they're federally funded. So that includes products, including iron, steel, manufactured products, and construction materials must be made in America, United States of America. So the items must be associated specifically with the proper documentation for the specific project. It cannot be generic. We must be able to track it to the specific park that you're working on. Discounts recorded as donations, such as professional services, equipment rental, or materials from private organizations and individuals, may also be eligible with proper documentation. In development, the applicant's expenses for preliminary design, environmental review for compliance, the cost estimates, and preparation of things such as your budgets may be eligible for match or reimbursement. They must be incurred within 3 years or less prior to the application to the National Park Service, and it must be documented clearly and also procured correctly. So it does require a lot of different documentation, but it can certainly be worthwhile because that can add up and then be used for the match reimbursement. Other grant funds, there are limitations to what grant funds or grant programs can be used to match. For acquisition, the Virginia Land Conservation Fund that's administered here at DCR as well can be a match for acquisitions if the timing lines up. Most federal grants cannot be used as match except the Community Development Block Grants and the Recreational Trails Program. We must have proper documentation such as the grant agreement documents before accepting that as match. So again, when you're looking at your budget, there are examples of ineligible items. These are more specified in the National Park Service Manual, but as an overview, we cannot fund projects that are design only. It either has to end as an acquisition or as a construction site, a site that has the amenities that were planned on. The purchase of heavy equipment is not eligible. Roads that are outside of the park boundary, indoor recreation facilities, as I said earlier, those are ineligible to fund. Even if they need to be done in a different phase, they'd have to be excluded from the LWCF process that you want to do in this phase. Consulting services and planning are ineligible, as well as legal fees. For the purposes of your staff, the travel and meals are not allowed to be reimbursed. The incidental acquisition cost and administrative costs are not eligible. Any lawyer fees, legal fees, etc. The purchase of equipment and large tools is not allowed. That's largely because of the Build America, Buy America, but we aren't sure if that equipment will be used for other projects than LWCF in the future, and equipment maintenance is an ineligible item as well. Application requirements. Let's see if we have any questions before we go on. Are there any questions right now, Kelly?
Hi, Crystal. There was just one, but I answered it. I'll read it out loud here. The question was specifically for ORLP and whether the area had to be identified as disadvantaged in that specific climate and environmental justice screening tool. And so the answer was yes, that in the National Park Service notice of funding opportunity specifically states that we have to use that mapper for the track to be identified as disadvantaged for this year. That's new for this year. That I believe that tool wasn't fully developed before this year's grant round, so they transitioned to using that for ORLAP program specifically.
Yep. Thank you, Kelly. And it's not required for this LWCF grant round, but if your census, if your community is within that, you can discuss that in your application. Thank you. All right, so to carry on, application requirements. This year we did put all of the different application documents up on the website, and are the responsibility of the applicant to fill out to the best of their ability. To make things easier, we did develop a checklist, and so I'm going to go through that step by step here. To include it within this checklist are the application questions, both for the DCR application and the National Park Service. You do need to have a site map, boundary map, project abstracts, budget breakdowns and cost estimates, site plan or acquisition appraisals, and the forms required for the National Park Service. And we'll also discuss the environment and historic review process. So here's 1 through 11 of the checklist. Please do review that. It's available on our website, as are all of these documents individually. The DCR application is what we recommend you do first. This is about halfway through the application. I wanted to point this out because there are some different resources that you will need to use, including mapping sites on DCR or Trust for Public Lands Park Serve to answer some of these questions. And we do ask that you just do your best effort. Try not to be too long-winded. We just want to know the overview, only include the necessary material and answers. The DCR application is the way that the committee scores the applications. Then the next item on the checklist is called the application and revision form. This is specifically a National Park Service document. They do ask that you do not delete anything from this, and we ask that you make your best effort. DCR will provide feedback if the project's selected to move forward. So in the beginning here, I'm just going to step through a couple of these items that can sometimes be difficult. The grant name, you're gonna have to be consistent with like your locality and your park and the park name. Grant number is not known at this time, so you can type NA for those. And then the date of preparation can be, a couple days before the application is due, or even next week, just when you've done the primary preparation. In this case, you're going to be putting a check mark next to new project grant application, and then whether it's acquisition, development, or combination projects. The rest of these boxes do not apply, and then you start with your brief description of proposal. The new project grant application, please put your contact information directly here. And the attachments checklist is a little different than the one that we've provided for the application. some items such as the pre-award site inspection report will be done by DCR with you after initial selection of the project to review more. But a lot of these cold climate criteria, use schedule for school parks are not applicable. In general, so that then this is a multi-page document. So again, just know that you are welcome to put NA on any question that's not applicable. There are certain sections to fill out for acquisition, and then there's certain segments for construction. So if you're just doing acquisition, you can NA all of the construction-based questions. This, though, is the stewardship considerations, page 9, and a lot of the the sections that are after that are for all projects. This section on page 9 especially is just to help the National Park Service to ensure that it is unlikely that the park will face a conversion in the future. That is a really big deal, that we all need to know that it's protected in perpetuity and that you will be able to maintain that protection forever. Then once you get to page 10, it's getting into the environmental and historic survey and opportunities to review. I will say that ideally, and what happens for most projects, is that on this chart of the environmental resources survey, it has all plus marks. And that's a good thing. And that is something that will help the review go smoother. But it is allowed at your time of application. Please answer this honestly. If you don't know the answer, that's okay. We'll help you determine how to find that answer. And if it's negative because of some response that you receive from a corresponding agency, then that can also be discussed and determined where to go from there. There's a second table as well, and it may look like it does have some overlap from the first one to the second one. And on this, it's common that everything says no. Although if you do answer yes or question mark, again, we can discuss that after you submit your application and how to find that or how to come to resolution. In this section also, you can explain any of the items that you've noticed that are possibly problematic. You can list who has helped do the survey. Sometimes that means a private consultant, sometimes that means staff. It can go either way. Some people don't have to use a consultant and some people do. List all required permits and approvals needed for this. It doesn't mean that you have to have the permits in hand, but we want to know that you have an educated estimate of what will be needed prior to construction. Acquisitions usually don't require permits and are a little more straightforward on both of these charts, but construction, we do have to look at all of these items very carefully. The NEPA pathway recommendation will be filled out by ourselves at DCR. Most of our projects qualify for categorical exclusions. It's very rare that we have to move to an environmental assessment. Ultimately, the National Park Service has the final authority on the NEPA pathway. I do want to stress that the Cultural and Historic Resources Review is very important to start as early as possible. This begins with a VCRIS request, and we do have a link on how to start doing that. And be prepared because the Department of Historic Resources may request a survey. I'd say that's almost at least a quarter of the projects that we get. Also, the National Park Service must complete tribal consultation with federally recognized tribes. That's a 30-day consultation opportunity, and the National Park Service cannot start that until they have the Department of Historic Resources letter. So in all correspondence with DHR and the other agencies, be sure to identify the existing disturbance of the site and then the depth planned for excavation or grading if it's a construction project. This is referred to as the area of potential effect. Please determine that early and be honest with that with all agencies, especially Department of Historic Resources. So please do that as soon as possible. All right, so again, these documents may seem unwieldy or, pretty heavy to complete, but just because you don't answer or have everything specifically, you know, um, everything very specifically answered, we just ask that you do your best effort. Um, if you don't have the answers at time of application, it doesn't necessarily mean the project will not be funded. It means that some more work will have to be done, and often you're waiting on the correspondence to be done at this stage, the agency correspondence and determining that final area for the maps. Use the facts. Don't try to exaggerate what you're going to be able to accomplish. And as I said, a small committee of experts from several agencies will score and review that DCR application and look at the other PDFs that you append. So do be consistent throughout your documents with your project scope and your budget. Um, and if you can understand each question, address it as well as you can. That will help with your application. At any point, you can call us. We do want you to be successful. It's better to reach out and call us ahead of time before the application is due. All right, so now I'm going to walk through the different PDFs that you do need to complete. We have these numbered, so we would like you to save them. In this case, this is 003, and then your park name, and then description form. You will be, at the end, you will have a lot of different PDFs that you have to compile in a folder for us. This one is the description and notification form, again, a National Park Service specific page. I do want to point out that you have to determine there if this is development acquisition. Your acreage must be you should feel confident in your actual acreage of the park. And this is the line acreage acquired if you're going to be acquiring. Otherwise, if you're creating a new park by developing park land that wasn't priorly in land and water conservation use, then you can put your acreage here. Special indices, you do have to answer any of these, especially if they're on a nationally recognized historic or natural landmark. And then we want to know if the land is leased or if it will be directly owned after the acquisition or after the development. The facility categories, you can be pretty basic and broad by selecting just one of these headers, or if you know specifically what you're accomplishing for construction, such as aquatic spray feature or camping individual campsites, you can specify that as well. The federal acquisition share also needs to be specific and match what you're requesting. Up here for the grant number and amendment number, you can leave them blank and put your contact here. In the subgrantee, the co-sponsor is usually blank. Next item we need, number 4, is a location map, and this is to be able to locate the site among the landscape that you're in. For projects that are eligible for moving forward, DCR staff, myself, Kelly, one of us will be coming out for an on-site inspection to discuss with you and your colleagues, take a look, take some pictures, and make sure that everything aligns with your application and seems reasonable. This also needs to have a north arrow and label any other public lands nearby, please. Then we need a more zoomed in boundary map. This is number 5 on the checklist. This identifies the recreation facilities and the proposed Land and Water Conservation Fund boundary. We do have several needs for this map, and it's important to get this as exact as possible so that we are sure that it won't change through the process of application and future work. There's a list of the items that you need in the DCR manual, but we do have to have north arrow, scale line, do sign it as the potential Land and Water Conservation Fund boundary. And I myself will sign after you to send that to the National Park Service. The site name, park name needs to be consistent. And be sure to mark the boundary clearly and indicate the total number of acres within that boundary. Again, the National Park Service wants the entire park to be protected. It's very hard to describe to them that, like, only half of this is going to be in a boundary, because then they'll say that's not the entire park. Then for number 7, we do need to have a narrative. This is a quick reference of the project elements. It should be 1 page maximum, make reference to each item included in the project, and cross-reference with the budget and application. This also is pretty much the same as the required project abstract summary. We do have the funding opportunity number here, PP LWCF 24-005. If you need it for your records, the CFDA is 15.916. This is a PDF form from the National Park Service, and they've asked to basically write this as if it's a press release or an announcement. This is a way for them to summarize the what, the why, and the how. So just imagine that that's what you're trying to accomplish, is one short paragraph, maybe 2 paragraphs about the highlights. The budget narrative is slightly different. This is number 7. This should include all eligible items in your budget by general category. There are multiple forms and Excel sheets that we'll be receiving and you'll be putting together on budget, so please be sure to be consistent. This is just a very summarized overview. After grant award, if the budget changes, that may require a formal amendment request to the National Park Service, and they could deny it. And I will say that sometimes that takes a long time to get an amendment verified and signed off on them. So be conscious of it's better to ask for more and spend less than it is to spend less and need more. Hope that makes sense. Even make sure that your prospective donations and in-kind labor appear in the budget sheet. Itemize your costs. So often if you're doing a construction project, you will have estimates that are very detailed about, the number of benches and the cost of those each, the square footage of parking lot and how much that will cost. So also please consider reasonable inflation rates and use the best construction estimates you have. The National Park Service is pretty picky about contingencies, so it's best to not plan to have those reimbursed. I know that you might need to have them included in your cost estimate, but if it's a complete project change and there's different contingent details that the National Park Service often denies. For the engineering and design, that is capped at 10% of the total project cost. So just make sure that in your calculations, that's not going to be over what the actual items you're accomplishing are. It's easier for everybody if on the budget sheets you round up or down to the nearest dollar or 10. If we start talking about cents and pennies, and there's potential room for error there. So if we can start off with rounded numbers, it would be beneficial for everyone. All right. Not seeing anything in the chat, so I'll go to the next part of the checklist. These are the required federal forms that the National Park Service requires, and so we are asking you, the applicants, to make your best effort to complete these for us so that we can all be on the same page and that we're not going to make mistakes on the form that maybe will cause some confusion about your project. I will say that these are specific PDFs and the formatting's a bit odd, and we can't help that, but we recommend to download all the files as a zip file, and we have that on our website. So I'm going to close out this PowerPoint for a minute and go over to that. Okay. All right. So the first form that we have for all projects, whether it's acquisition or construction, is called the SF424, Application for Federal Assistance. So I've filled out some of this to help you know. It's a blank form when you download it. So this is an application new. The date received can basically be the date that you're working on it. We will create an updated form of this when we receive it, which will probably be the application close date. And you can skip things that are not red, but it's helpful to have legal name of your specific city or county or agency. If you can provide the EIN and the DUNS number, that will be helpful for future financial transactions. Please put in the address of your specific office that you work in. And then you can put the name, primary name for the person that will be who we can contact for grant details, the telephone number of that person, as well as the specific email address. On the next page, you really just need to drop down the first, whether you're state, agency, county, city, Native American, pick the best one that fits for you. And the name of the federal agency is the National Park Service. CFD is 15.916. Funding opportunities. Sometimes these show up as necessary entry. So I just wanted to show you some things that will help you fill that out. And then number 15, we don't need a long sentence. It says descriptive title. We just need to know the applicant name, city or county, etc., the park name, and then whether it's acquisition, construction, or combination. On the third page, congressional district, you can find that pretty easily. So specific to where you are, what is that? The start date proposed for this round is hopefully they will be funded and authorized to start October 1st. That's the beginning of the federal fiscal year, and then projected to end 24, 25, 26, 27. I made a mistake there. So 3-year project periods again. The estimated funding, things are a lot easier if you're really requesting exactly 50-50. If you say that you're providing 1,200,000 and you're only requesting 1 million, then it's an overmatch. And you can have an overmatch, but at first, if you can plan to have 50-50, that goes more smoothly. So you will put in your local amount that you're matching and your request for the federal funding. Not covered by EO 12372. And then click the agree and put in that name again of the primary contact, and then just type the name here, which will serve as an e-signature. It is up to each locality or agency who needs to be that authorized representative. We're not picky about it. We're not picky about it ourselves, but just use your best judgment there. Okay, and then so the other forms depend upon whether you're doing acquisition or construction. This one is the budget information for non-construction programs. So for acquisition only, you do not need to do 424A if you're doing a construction project. You'll put in Land and Water Conservation Fund, that CFDA number I've been referring to. And then there's a couple, there's a couple details that, there's a lot of columns and rows that are not filled in at all. In this case, again, with our $2 million project, the federal will be 1 million, the non-federal will be 1 million, and it's a new budget because it's a new request. On the next page, acquisition is basically other only. There's not any other allowed expenses typically allowed with acquisitions. In this column, you will put the total project cost, and then it'll equate and equal that out in the 5th column. And then on this page, it's recommended that you go ahead and fill out that you're going to be requesting the cash in the 1st quarter. But it can certainly be allowed anytime in the 3-year grant period. And the estimates of federal funds only goes on this grant program. we do not have direct charges or indirect charges for LWCF, so you don't have to fill those out. Okay. Also for acquisition projects specifically, we need the assurances for non-construction programs signed. This goes through a lot of the different lists of federal requirements, acts, CFRs, and we do just ask that you type your signature and you put the title again of who you think is most important or allowed to be the signatory, and then the date that you are completing it. Then those are for acquisition, but we have different forms for construction, and at the header it'll tell you construction or non-construction. This is an overview of the budget information. It is best if these different rows align with what your budget estimates were before. Sometimes it's a little hard to know what goes in each row, and you can contact us if you have questions about that, but put them in what I call the bucket that you think is best for that. Demolition and removal, for example, can be for some grading, and then construction usually is for the bulk of your cost for a construction project, but there are certainly other items that will be incurred for the project. And then it's a 50-50 match, so put that in and it'll calculate what you are requesting. This is a one-page form. There's assurances similar to the ones for acquisition, but this one is specific to construction. So again, name, title, organization, and date are required for that form. So back to acquisition, the real property status report is needed. This is not needed for construction. You will not have a federal grant number assigned yet. It'll be a 51 dash number in the future, but you can just enter something generic there. Same recipient as you filled out before, same DUNS and EIN as you did on the SF424. It does ask several times for that contact information, so it is a little repetitive, but then you need to do attachment B, sorry, request to acquire. The SF429B is a couple pages, and you really just fill out what you can. None of it is required, but we ask that you do the best you can. Intended use is public outdoor recreation. The proposed ownership should be owned. None of these others should really be what you're trying to accomplish with LWCF funding. Proposed acquisition date is pretty helpful to know. And then the actual appraised value and 50% equals the total sum. Frequently, these are left blank. And then that is the SF429B. All right, let me see if I did everything. C and D are good. Okay, so that's the federal forms. I will say that I'll click to this one, for example. It's best to save as a document, but it's even more helpful to save as a PDF, as to print as a PDF, because then you can save it as a file name and it won't erase the documentation entries that you put in there. If you have any issues with these forms, you can reach out to any of us. We've put our contact information, email, and phone numbers in the manual. Okay. That was kind of the hardest part. Now we can get into some other things. Let me get the PowerPoint back up. Any questions yet, Kelly?
Nope, no more questions yet.
Okay. All right. So again, we have that as a zip folder. It's very convenient. It's best to work from those. And your application that you email to us is going to include multiple PDFs. We do realize that it's not always easy to combine the documents as one, but if you have that capability, it is preferred. All right, then since this is federal funding being requested, it does have to comply with the National Environmental Protection Act as well as the Section 106 Historic Preservation Act. So we have laid out here the required documents that we need to have to review and move that along. We do not have them as saved as examples or forms on our website because it will be independent on your project. So we do ask that you save them as a PDF and number them so that we can make sure that we're receiving the right things. And these links are the most recent links I verified, and how you can go ahead and submit your map and your project description, submit the same thing to each of these different databases. They all pretty much have a 30-day turnaround window. So do plan for that as well. If you don't get them within the deadline of the application, you can tell us that it's pending. And when you do expect to get that correspondence back within the 30-day period, we do want each one as its own PDF. If possible, you might have a consultant that's working on it and they might want to give you like a 250-page document. That's fine that you get that, but we really only need the proof of what was submitted to them and what their response was. So to say a little bit more about that, the applicant is who is responsible to comply with the NEPA review requirements. DCR, NPS, we don't get that correspondence for you. You have to get that for yourself. It's towards trying to figure out what NEPA pathway we have. I was talking about that earlier in that application revision National Park Service form. Those tables will help us verify this, but most of our projects that we've had, at least in the past several years, are categorical exclusions. If there were a lot of agencies or multiple issues with the project, it could lead to an environmental assessment, but please be advised that's not typical, and a consultant might be saying that that's what's needed, but that's not always the case. The required agency reviews to be completed are specifically the Department of Environmental Quality, DEQ, the Virginia Historic Preservation Office's Department of Historic Resources, and the United States Fish and Wildlife Service IPAC report. That is what primarily the National Park Service is looking for. Of course, we have a couple other agencies that we prefer you work with in Virginia, such as the Department of Wildlife Resources and the DCR Natural Heritage Review. These are in reference to threatened and endangered resources, wildlife, and flora. And then in Virginia, there is a question on the National Park Service application about what permits you expect to need. Basically, if you're going to be working within public waterways, you're likely to need Army Corps of Engineer permitting, or at least review, and also Virginia Marine Resource Commission, VMRC, permit review and possible permit as well. That's usually called a joint permit application. You don't have to have those permits in hand at time of application, but they do need to be in hand prior to construction. All right. So again, the lack of NEPA and Section 106 documentation is the #1 reason that projects do not get authorized. The sooner you can get this correspondence during this grant window time, the more National Park Service can prepare a determination. You can write us a letter or put on a PDF that it's in progress, like I said, and put that together. The more ready your project will be for NPS review, then it has a higher potential for being awarded this fall. Projects that cannot complete the required review and compliance documents may not be considered for authorization and funding in this 2024 grant round. We might be able to hold the project and work with you to get into another grants.gov window, but we cannot guarantee anything that happens. It's all up to the National Park Service authorization. So I think that has provided a rather quick, but thorough review of everything that is needed for the applications this year. We're really excited to be able to offer $12 million out there, and we hope to see a lot of really unique projects. We have them throughout the state, over 450 projects thus far. You can apply for a park that's already been funded in the past, but now you need some additional amenities and work on it. So no outdoor recreation is a problem. We want to see creativity and work with you for your local needs. Again, you're welcome to contact me anytime via email or especially via phone. This is my work cell phone. It's usually on 9 to 5. And that way you can discuss your project with me and we can talk about anything specific that might need to be discussed. All right. Thank you everyone for attending. Are there any questions out there? You are welcome to raise your hand, or if there's a way to unmute.
Yes, everyone should be able to unmute themselves at this point.
Okay. Right. Well, not hearing anything, not seeing anything. Again, I hope you call me with any questions. I'll stop.